I hope all of you are doing great, and I hope all of you had a good night's rest. Alright, so for today we are about to begin a new poem. But before we start the poem, I want you people to answer few questions which I'm about to ask you right now. Okay, so the first question is, do you have any pet cats at home? If so, if you have a pet cat at home, have you noticed anything strange about their behavior? Right, so with this note, let's begin this new poem. And the title of this poem is Macavity The Mystery Cat, and the poet is T.S. Eliot. So this poem is taken from your textbook, The Honey Dew. So before we get into the poem in detail, there are a few points we need to remember as to how we are going to learn it. Okay, so we start with the introduction, the stanza-wise explanation, the literary analysis, and the conclusion. Okay, now let's move on to the introduction of the poem. As I told you, the title of the poem is Macavity The Mystery Cat, and the poet of this poem is T.S. Eliot. So, from the title, we get to know that we are about to learn about a cat. So, we are going to deal with a cat, okay, the behavior of a cat, okay, and look at the title over here. It says The Mystery Cat. Macavity The Mystery Cat. So we get to know that this particular cat is very mysterious. Okay, he's got a very strange behavior. Okay, and his name, this cat's name is Macavity. So let's get to the recitation of this poem. Macavity is a mystery cat. He is called the Hidden Paw, for he is the master criminal who can defy the law. He is the bafflement of Scotland Yard, the flying squad's despair. For when they reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. Okay, so that's how the poem goes. Now let's get to the detailed explanation of the stanza. Macavity is a mystery cat. So I told you already in the beginning, Macavity is a very mysterious cat. He is called the Hidden Paw. So when we talk about people, when we talk about criminals who are people, okay, they ensure that when a crime is done, they ensure that they do not leave behind any traces. Isn't it? Not even their footprints will be found. Okay, so Macavity is one such person. Now Macavity is a cat, so that's the reason why we say paw. Okay, the underside of the cat's leg is called as the paw. So when Macavity does something wrong, he ensures, he makes sure that even his paw prints are not left behind. And this is the reason why he is called as the Hidden Paw. Okay? For he is the master criminal who can defy the law. So you see, the poet tells us that Macavity is the master criminal. Okay, he is the main person. So Macavity is the master criminal who can defy the law. The meaning of defy. Defy means to disobey. So Macavity is the biggest criminal who will always disobey the law. He is the bafflement of Scotland Yard, the flying squad's despair. So bafflement, the meaning of bafflement is confusion. Okay, a state of confusion. Scotland Yard, the headquarters of London Police Force? Flying Squad. Flying Squad is a group of policemen who are ready to get into action immediately. Okay, so he is the bafflement. So he is the confusion he is the reason why the Scotland Yard gets confused. Okay, and the Flying Squad loses their hope. Okay, Flying Squad, as I told you, is a group of policemen who are ready to get into action. Meaning of despair means to lose hope. Okay, so Macavity is the reason why the Scotland Yard is confused and the Flying Squad loses its hope. Okay, so who is the reason behind it? Macavity. For when they reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. So when the Scotland Yard and the Flying Squad, when they reach the scene of crime, okay, Macavity will never ever be found. Yes? Macavity, there is no one like Macavity. He is broken every human law. He breaks the law of gravity. His powers of levitation would make a fakir stare, and when you reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. You may seek him in the basement, you may look up in the air, but I tell you once and once again, Macavity is not there. Alright, so this is the recitation for the stanza. So let's get to the explanation of this stanza. Macavity, there is no one like Macavity. So the poet is telling us that Macavity is a very different character. He is very unique. Yes, nobody can be like Macavity. He's broken every human law. He breaks the law of gravity. So every law which is in the land, Macavity ensures that he breaks it. Okay, he always disobeys the law. He breaks the law of gravity. Now what is the law of gravity, children? When you throw something up, it has to come down. Okay, or from a 3-story building, if you throw something, it will obviously fall down. But in Macavity's case, when he does something wrong, he disappears into thin air. He is not to be seen anywhere around. His powers of levitation would make a fakir stare, and when you reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. Now, levitation means it is to float in the air. Okay? Fakir, the meaning of fakir, he is a person who possesses magical powers. Okay, fakir is a person who possesses magical powers. He is like a religious person. He is almost like a saint. And the next quality about him is that he lives by getting money from others. Okay, so you see, fakir is a person who possesses magical powers. Okay, but still this particular fakir, okay, the fakir is amazed. He is astounded. He is astonished looking at Macavity's power. What's his power? To levitate. Okay? And when you reach the scene of crime, Macavity is not there. So, when the crime has happened, when you reach that particular spot, you will never ever find Macavity. You may seek him in the basement, you may look up in the air, but I tell you once and once again, Macavity is not there. So the poet is telling us, you can look up for him, you can search for him in the basement, you can search for him up in the air or in the atmosphere. So the poet is trying to tell us you can search for him everywhere. But I'm telling you again and again, And this is the last time I'm telling you, Macavity is just not there. Let's quickly look up for the meanings. Levitation, the power to float in the air. So this is a small cartoon of a fakir. Can you see? He's actually sitting and meditating, but if you look closer, he's actually floating in the air. Fakir, a sadhu or saint who lives solely on alms. So he lives by receiving money from others. One who does magic. Macavity is a ginger cat. He is very tall and thin. You will know him if you saw him, for his eyes are sunken in. His brow is deeply lined with thought. His head is highly domed. His coat is dusty from neglect. His whiskers are uncombed. He sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake. And when you think he's half asleep, he's always wide awake. So, Macavity is a ginger cat. Now, when we talk about people, okay, ginger means they are people who have red hair. Now, see, we have jet black hair, right? We have jet black hair. But there are people around the world who have red hair, okay, and they have freckles on their faces, those black dots on the face, that's called as freckles. So people who have red hair and freckles on their faces, they are called as ginger. Okay, so the poet is actually giving us a description. Okay, he's describing Macavity. Okay, so Macavity is a ginger cat. He's very tall and thin. Yes, you will know him if you saw him, for his eyes are sunken in. So the poet tells us that by chance, if you happen to see Macavity, you will instantly realize that it is Macavity. How? Because his eyes are sunken in. Okay, that means his eyes are pushed behind, it's pushed inside. Okay, his eyes are pushed inside from the surrounding areas. Okay, his brow is deeply lined with thought, his head is highly domed. Now, he says that when you look at Macavity, his brows, you have your eyebrows, right? So, Macavity's eyebrows, they always meet together. See? His brow is deeply lined with thought. Lined means Macavity's brows meet each other. Why? Why is it so? Because Macavity is constantly thinking. He's constantly thinking about something or the other. His head is highly domed. So, the poet tells us that Macavity's head is hemispherical in shape. Okay, hemispherical in shape. Hemisphere, the shape hemisphere is actually a 3D shape. Okay, his coat is dusty from neglect. His whiskers are uncombed. So, we get to know that Macavity is a very untidy cat. His coat is very dirty and it's very dusty. Okay, why? Because he doesn't take care about it. He does not take time to keep his coat clean. His whiskers are uncombed. Okay, what are whiskers? Now, when you look at a cat, cats have fur on them, right? Now, the facial hair, we are talking about the facial hair over here, okay? So, the facial hair on the cat, which is protruding on the face, the facial hair, okay, which is protruding out, which is pushing out, or which is pointing out long. When you look at the cat, you will get to see there are like few hairs which are very long. Okay, that is called as whiskers. So Macavity does not keep his whiskers combed. Okay, he does not comb his whiskers. He sways his head from side to side with movements like a snake. So Macavity has this habit of moving his head from side to side with movements like a snake. Now, snakes are actually very silent. Yes, you will not get to know if a snake is coming. They are very soft, they are very silent. So Macavity's movements are compared to a snake's movement. And when you think he is half asleep, he is always wide awake. So when you look at Macavity, you may think that he is half asleep. Okay, but actually he is listening to everything what is happening around him. He is noticing everything what is happening around him. So that's why the poet says he is always wide awake. So these are the meanings which we saw. Alright. So ginger, a person with red hair, freckles and pale skin. So you have a picture for a person called as Ginger, okay? It's not the person's name. We simply give them a nickname saying Ginger, okay? Sunken, lower than the surrounding areas, domed, hemispherical in shape, neglect, to fail to care for something, whiskers, a cat's facial hair, sways, moves slowly from side to side. Coming to the last part of the poem, Macavity, Macavity, there's no one like Macavity, for he is a fiend in feline shape, a monster of depravity. You may meet him in a by street, you may see him in the square, but when a crime is discovered, then Macavity is not there. Okay, so do you notice the first line in this stanza? If you had noticed, it has been repeated throughout the poem. Yes? For he is a fiend in feline shape. Now, fiend means a bad person, an evil person. In better words, a devilish person. Okay? Feline. Feline is the name given to the cat family. Monster of depravity. Depravity means corruption. Okay? So, Macavity is actually a devilish person who is in the shape of a cat. So, the poet is telling us that Macavity is a very evil person. He is a devilish character. Okay? He is a devilish character who is in the form of a cat. And he is the monster of corruption. You may meet him in a by street, you may see him in the square. Okay? Now, by street, it's a small street. Okay? And square is not the shape square which you think. Okay? It's not the shape. Okay? Square is a place. It's a place where people gather together for some reason. Okay? It's like Vatican Square or London Square, okay? So it's a place where people are commonly seen, okay? So you may meet him in a by street, you may see him in the square. That means you may get to see Macavity in ordinary places. You may get to see Macavity in ordinary places like the street and the square. But when a crime is discovered, then Macavity is not there. But when a crime has taken place, everybody around knows that it is Macavity who has done it. But when you reach the crime site, okay, when you reach the crime scene, you will never ever find Macavity. Macavity is not there. Okay, so depravity, moral corruption. So this poem is written by T.S. Eliot. The poet of this poem is T.S. Eliot. So that's it for today's class, children. I hope all of you understood the explanation of the poem. So have a great day, children.